I'm John Nichols, and this is Humans for Nature. And today I'd like to introduce you to a new segment I'm going to start, and that is telling the story of our book. That's Jan and I. We wrote a book of adventures of our life, and we called it Dreamer of the Day. Now I'm going to put that into chapter, and I'm probably doing it on a fortnightly basis, and I'll tell one chapter, and I've got 150 odd images that I'm going to show with you. I haven't got any video, but I've got loads of images, so I'll be starting that, and I'm going to start the first chapter today. Now, to begin with, I'd just like to give you a rundown quickly on my arrival in Australia in 1963. It was October 1963. I came to Australia, and I came as a £10 POM. For those outside Australia who don't understand, that means that the government only charged me 10 quid to come here, and that was a godsend because there's no way in the world at that stage in England I could have afforded the airfare out here. But I came, and I never regretted it. I was never one of these POMs that disliked the place and couldn't wait to get home. I loved it from the moment I started and the moment I arrived, and it was great. With regards to work in England, to begin with, I was a London bobby in the Met, but after a few years I decided I didn't want to work in London the rest of my life, and but after that I got on a course, electronics course, which was really meant for people in the forces, but the fact I've been a policeman, they managed to get me on this course. I did a 9-month course, full-time course on electronics, and was able to get a job in Marconi, and I worked there until I decided to come to Australia. Now, when I got to Australia, I didn't want to work inside, so I thought, well, why don't I try fixing TVs? I had no experience at it, but the theory, I was quite good with the theory, and most electronics, I was quite good with the theory. So I decided to fix TVs, and that turned out not to be quite as easy as I thought, mainly because well, I didn't have any practical experience, so I started, and I got sacked from the first 2 jobs within a week, and the third one I managed to last long enough to keep going, because every job I learned a little bit more, and finally managed to become where I could call myself a TV technician as my profession, and that's how that started. And then 9 months or 8 months after being in Sydney, I bought a twin spinner Ford, which is an old 1956, I think it was. I paid 10 quid for it. The clutch had gone, but I was able to replace that. And I drove that for 11,000 miles around Australia. Went up to Queensland to visit friends there, went across right to the middle of the centre, down across the Nullarbor. I went over to Perth and down to Bunbury, and then I drove it back. And when I got back after 11,000 miles, I sold it for 10 quid, which I thought was pretty good. So that's how that all started, and that goes back to my history. But when I got back, I decided what I'd like to do is I loved having a challenge. So I thought, well, maybe I could build a yacht. I'd built small things, but never. I thought I'd build a yacht, but I didn't have much money. Of course, I had the 10 quid I got for the car, but I didn't have much else. So I decided and researched it, but I had a love for multi-hulls, and I looked at trimaran and the 29-foot trimaran. I thought, well, if I don't build it too fast and I make it go, I'd be all right. So I started to build this trimaran. I rented someone's backyard in the suburb of Brookvale, which is a northern suburb of Sydney, and I started to build the trimaran, and I'd been there about 12 months working on that. When Jan and I decided to write a book, about our adventurous life. We thought it'd be a good idea if we started it on the day we first met, and that was the first Sunday in January 1966. Marion, who is a friend of our flat and the boys in our flat, just was coming round on the Sunday to visit us, and she brought with her this young friend of hers who she worked with, and it was Jan. And right from the start, I remember thinking I rather liked Jan. She had a lovely smile, beautiful teeth, all the things that would appeal to a fellow like me. And most of all, on that day, she, after looking at the boat, and she decided, she'd asked me if she could look at the plans. And I thought, well, this is interesting, the plans. I've never had anyone ask to look at the plans before. But anyway, I got the plans out and I showed her, and she started to look at them. Now, I must admit, I wasn't at all troubled by the fact she was looking at them upside down. That made no difference to me at all. I mean, the fact that she showed interest was all I needed, and it worked pretty well. So that's how we first met, and I asked her out before she left that day. I plucked up courage and asked her for a date, and actually the second date we had, she invited me around her house and her parents' home for dinner, and she cooked the dinner, and I thought, well, this is really getting good. I mean, not only is she interested in the boat, she enjoys cooking. So she cooked a meal, and it was beautiful, and I met her mum and dad, and I became very good friends with both of them, especially her mother, and that worked pretty well. Jen and I, we became an item for at least 16 months, and always worked together on the trimaran all day, every Sunday. Jan did most of the sanding and painting. Later on she was joined by her old friend Roz, who came on a few Sundays. Now I worked every weekday. I had a pattern that I used to follow, and I followed the rest of my life in my boat building career. I started work every day on the boat at 7 every weekday, and then I worked at 11, and then I went off and I fixed TVs till 8 o'clock at night. Now on Saturdays I worked all day on the boat, but often most Saturdays Jan and I went out somewhere, and what I always appreciated was that wherever restaurant we went to or place we went to, she always paid half. She would never allow me to pay the full amount, and I liked that. I thought it was a good touch. I really liked it. Now Jen and I used to often have discussions about my intentions of what I wanted to do with the boat, and even before I started building it, was my intention to try and sail it back to the Thames, to Benfleet on the Thames in England, and that was just my little dream I had about doing it, but Jan wasn't very keen on that at all, and I really, looking back on it, I can't blame her. It was a very small boat, and she didn't like that at all. So when it got closer, about within a month of launching the boat, we sort of got to the stage where we decided that maybe it was better that we went our own ways. I did my thing and she did hers, but I never ever thought that would happen. I really thought we'd work it out. But then we did decide to go our own ways, but I didn't like that at all. So I rang her and found out that she and her friend Roz had rented a flat for 1 week up in Avalon, which is not very far north of us. So when she came home, I asked her mother to sort of let her know that I'd rang and could she give me a call or come and see me. Well, it was on the next Sunday that I was working on the boat on my own, feeling pretty depressed, and she turned up and we discussed it more, and she told me at that time that she'd applied for a job before she went on this week's holiday, as a receptionist in a hotel in New Guinea in Port Moresby, and we found out that day that she'd been accepted and she'd be leaving in a month, and so we decided we'd become an item again for that 1 month. And I asked her, I said, look, you can't blame me if I tried to change your mind. And I tried, but I never did. She was determined that she was going to go up to New Guinea, and that was the way it was going to be. At 7 o'clock in the morning, when I picked up Jan at her home to take her to the airport for a flight to Port Moresby, and it was a quiet trip. I'd bought her one of these monkeys, little dolls that were popular at the time, and I got Hillary to make me a little pouch which I hung around its neck, and I wrote one of my poetic messages and put it inside, and but we didn't say much on the way to the airport. But when we, as we started to get close to the airport, Jan started to cry, and she didn't read the message, and when we arrived at the airport, she was still crying, and also when we went into the check-in area, she was still crying. She checked into the flight, and we said our final goodbyes and had a last hug, and she disappeared into the departure area, and she was still sobbing. I just thought to myself, what the bloody hell's going on? I didn't want her to leave, and it didn't seem like she wanted to go. As I drove home, I realised that this being in love can have some very depressing moments. It was going to be a year before I could see Jan again and give her a loving hug, and that was going to be fleeting.